Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream tonight. Hey AJ, thank you for moderating my stream. Nice to see you on the chat. Before we start, please pay attention to the disclaimer. We are talking about playing a computer game, not handling real life trains or railway installations. So please leave this stuff to the professionals and do not interfere. It is dangerous and most annoying. What we want to do today is to play the Isle of Wight in 2 centuries and 2 millennia on 2 different trains and have a look at a piece of technology that is on so many different trains that it is really surprising if you are not, yeah, if you don't know it anyway. EP brakes, electro-pneumatic brakes. It is quite a standard, but still, if you read in the forums, there's still a lot of people that don't really know what it is, and I thought we should talk about it today and put it in some perspective. So where are my markers for the DLC? The Isle of Wight. And I can already click the service. Yeah, my idea actually was, since the Isle of Wight is the only route that we have twice in the game. We have the old Isle of Wight and we have the new Isle of Wight, the 2022 DLC, and we have 2 different trains. And last week we have been running the 38 tube stock on the Bakerloo line, and we have talked about the fact that when those trains were decommissioned on the London Underground, some of them were used as this train here, the class 483 on the Isle of Wight. So it is actually the same train, but obviously a bit modified so that it runs on the third rail thing. Hey ZD Radar, ahoy! Yeah, dobry večer to you. Nice to have you back. And it is nice that you join us to the Isle of Wight. Which one did I want to play? It was the 1620 service. So my idea actually was to use the old DLC, the old train, the 483, and start from Ryde Pier Head, drive to Shanklin, and then have the presentation, then switch over to the new DLC and go back from Shanklin to Ryde Pier Head on the newish train, the 484. We will see it is not actually that new because it was more or less built in 1978. What did the dogs do now? There was some noise behind me. Well, I think everything is okay. So before we start, just have a look at our train that we have here. You might recognize it from last week. This is originally the London Underground. Cannot really open the doors. We have to go to the guard panel to open the doors or use the keyboard shortcuts. We will do a lot of running here because helpfully they are on this end. Guard open should be okay by now, even though we will see that later this bar here does not get removed. This is where we start with our service here. Kara is playing with a bottle. Thank you, AJ, for telling me what was happening in the background. So, it got a repaint. This is the train that we have been on last week, the 38 tube stock, modified for the use on the Isle of Wight. No longer 4 rails, but 3 rails, and a bit of a different voltage. It is laggy, Alice. I'm sorry to hear that. It is actually so low, this train, that you have to crouch if you want to go into it from the platform. What they did, they actually repaired a bit of the train here, because you might remember when you have been playing the Isle of Wight before, is that the speedo was not really going precisely. They fixed it. Sometimes you spawned on the seat when it was still at the wall, like this. They fixed that too. So that works now. The AI trains still don't turn on their lights or the wipers, I'm afraid. But that's it. So how to set up this train? It is actually not so difficult. We have to put in the master key, then we have to actually find the master key lever, turn it to on, then the train is energized. Here we have instrument lights and headlights to turn them on. Actually quite bright. The destination board works on its own. We're running on the D end. If you remember what that was, we talked about this in the stream about the 38 tube stock, and you can see that the instruments are a bit different. We have the speedometer down here now, not up there in this corner, and we got rid of this bulky thing. We have a more elaborate gauges for the brakes. We have actually a brake cylinder gauge, we have a brake pipe gauge, and we have a brake reservoir gauge. We will see later in the presentation what this is about. We have an EP brake indicator that always switches to off if we release it. We have a brake handle and that man's handle, what is the master controller, and the reverser, just like we had this on the 38 stock on the Bakerloo line. We still have forward 1 and forward 2. Again, I would suggest to put it on forward 2 if we want to use it. We have to press the dead man's handle. We have to release the brakes, obviously. We will have to unlock and lock the doors. If we use the guard open like I did, then we will maybe confuse our system here with the keyboard shortcuts, but this is not the problem because we will start it anyway. One word, if you try to turn on your instrument lights by any chance and go to this button, trip power, then you're actually disconnecting the train from the power supply, so the train is dead now. If that happens, don't need to fret and don't need to restart the service. There is a button that is called cold start on the caption or overload reset, and if you push this, you actually get the power back. So we have the wiper here, the horn here. What is more a whistle than a horn, to be fair. And that's about it. We have a handbrake here that you can set. The destination board works automatically, and the door controls are, as we have seen that on the guard panel. Again, some buttons. We have guard open and guard close. That only opens this one door here, and then the guard can step out and look along the train if it is safe to open the doors, and if so, there are 2 buttons to open the doors and 1 button to close them. You will see that here they forgot, for whatever reason, this bar here. This only gets removed if the doors are opened completely, not with for the guard thingy to happen. We have the light switches for the passenger lights, for the saloon lights. The other buttons are dysfunctional, you can turn them off again, and we have a guard buzzer, so in case there is actually a guard, then they can buzz us off. This is exactly like in our Siemens train. CD Radar says the battery button is right below coach light button. Careful with that. Yeah, that is that is nice. It happens so often to me when running the Isle of Wight that I just started the service. Okay, schlag, schlag, schlag. Get the service done and set up the train, and then you actually turned it off. So this is the instrument light, this is the headlight. This is more or less what we need to do. And this time I actually will try to act as a guard. Since we are running from the D end, we always have to go through those 2. So if I close the doors now, I won't be able to function as a guard, so I will have to press guard open first, then close them. Then I can check if they are closing properly, get in, close guard, and go back to my cab. Hopefully I close the door, sit down, release the brakes, get this thing moving. The master controls for getting these trains moving are exactly the same as on the 38 stock. We have shunting, we have full series and full parallel, and what that means we have looked into in depth last week. So that is the same, and today we will look at the brake system here. If we think back to last week, then we remember that we had four notches for the EP brakes, and then the so-called Westinghouse brake as a backup system. So we're running across the pier here, the pier head, to the Esplanade station. If you want to get to the Isle of Wight, you can do so with a ferry, and then you end up at the pier head, coming from Plymouth, I think. No, Portsmouth. And you can also come by hovercraft. And on the newer version, the 2022 version, there is actually one or two hovercrafts standing, and coming by hovercraft you would end up here at this Esplanade station, and here you can also connect to the buses, so never forget to close the door so that nobody gets into your cab. Then we have to go through here, open guard. People will always try to leave the train if the doors are still closed, so but the idea actually is that the guard steps out first and checks if the train is properly aligned with the platform so that nothing bad can happen. Our passengers here are not really well behaved. And we close them again, we check that everything closes properly, and then we can push the guards close. I think we can use this timer to turn on the lights because it is getting late already. And light is breaking. Back to the cab. Sit down. And then prepare for departure. Platform check. Signal check. Release the brakes. Go. There's only this one platform at this station here, and there is only this one line used on the Pier Head station. This is actually as it is in real life. The other line is not used, at least not for passenger services. And this is why we're going across the switches to the left side. Ryde tunnel. Ryde tunnel is the lowest point that we have on the line, so we're actually going downhill from Esplanade, and then as soon as we are on the other side we're going uphill again to St. John's Street Road, St. John's Road, Ryde St. John's Road. We're getting a caution signal, as we can see. It is a semaphore signal, it is on. We have heard about caution signals of that kind And know that this does not necessarily mean that the next signal will be at red, but it can also mean that the second but next signal, the exit signal at the station, is at red. And this is most probably what will happen in our case, because typically the entry signal will be off at green so that we can enter the station, but the exit signal is still kept at red. See, entry signal is green, so we can enter the station. And why was the signal before kept it yellow? Because the exit signal is at red. This is Ryde St. John's Road, where the only depot on the Isle of Wight is located here. On the left you have a bay platform for special services that terminate here, and behind that there is the depot. And there are actually some services that you can drive your train in and out of the depot. So, again, let's play the guard. Here it says, not for public use, it's only for our use. Guard open. Check if everything is okay. See that people don't behave and squeeze through the tiny gaps. And then open the doors. And people are quite rude, right? They just walk against you, try to shove you out of the way. Alright, can close the doors. And if we open it with guard open, our door will be open except for this rogue bar here. And then we can guard close. Never forget to close those doors here. Sit down. Signal. Platform. Signal. Release. Go. Now the exit signal is at green. Still in a 20 limit starting at this station. So we mustn't overdo it. Here is the 45 sign. Just pass it with the whole train. And then we can accelerate. From full series to full parallel at about 20 miles, I have found is the most convenient switching point. Now we're getting close to Smallbrook Junction. Whistleboard. Careful with the speedo. This unmarked marking here is not the 45 but the 50. So be careful not to overshoot. Getting a yellow here. So we need to take it easy. But it's switching to green so we can accelerate. Because of this go via location thing, we don't know now, unless we checked it out here, that we have to stop in Smallbrook Junction, because most of the services don't stop at Smallbrook Junction. And now we know we have to stop at Smallbrook Junction. It is just here. where the line gets back to be a unidirectional line. Just one platform. And typically we just run through this station here. But this service that I picked, it stops at Smallbrook Junction. And why is that so? Because Smallbrook Junction is actually quite a special junction. The only thing that you can do here, now go those last yards please, is to switch to the heritage steam railway that is here on the Isle of Wight. So you cannot actually go anywhere from this junction here, but you can switch to the steam railway. Okay guys, just wait for me to open the doors. It's much more convenient to go through the open doors. Yeah. Now they block me from going to the steam railway. Close the doors. Check if everything is closed. Guard close. Don't get lost behind the doors. And back to the cab. Platform check. All good. Signal, there is no signal. And we can start. So, while the train is running away, you can see here is actually tracks and a station. And this is not connected with the tracks that we are running on, but it belongs to the heritage steam railway. That goes to a place that's called Junction or something like that. 45 limit. This has not changed. And we're going still uphill. What we will see as soon as we set the master controller to off, we will lose speed. So every now and then we will have to punch in a bit more traction. What we can't do is just go back a notch or two, because as soon as we are running full parallel, this camshaft device will stay at the full parallel until we go all the way down to off. Here's a coasting diamond. If you want, you can coast from here to Brading. The summit is about where this bridge here is. After this bridge we're going in a decent part. There will be a bend to the left and a limit to 40 just around the bend. Here's the sign. So we have to stick to the 40 until we get to Brading. Morpeth board for reduction to 20. But there is a lot of room to get to this 20 reduction actually. So the distances where those Morpeth boards are put up, they vary quite heavily on this route here. Maybe open the window so we can hear the whistling a bit better. So when we're going into this bend, we can actually prepare for the slowdown to 20. There will be another whistle board. And here behind the bridge, there is the 20. Well, would not have been necessary to use the next notch in the brake system. Braiding station is actually a bit different here on the old version compared to the new version of the line, because we have two platforms in braiding station, but only one track, as you can see. And before, I think 2021, this is actually what it was like. So they were just using one platform with one track, and the other side was mothballed. And in the 2022 version, the other track is there, and they are using the other platform. With the effect that you have slightly different speed restrictions. Again, I'm playing the guard. Guard open. Check. Check. Doors open. Nice thing is if you close the doors early, the loading sequence still goes on until you do the guard close. Station check. All good. Release, go. Don't forget we are in a 20. And we have not passed this level crossing. So even without a whistle board for it, we should not pass it without whistling after starting the train. The 20 without a sign ends as soon as the train has left the station, the platform, and then we are back to 45. Maybe there should be a sign, but I have not managed to find one. Whistle board. Next up is Sandown, where we will have a restriction to 15 and then 10 at the platform itself. But again, enough time to slow down. There is this really long stretch of track here, where we can just coast. Here is the level crossing for the whistle board. Taillights are actually working here on this train. And after this bend to the right that we are just approaching right now, there will be the reduction to 15 for the station. We're going uphill a bit here, so we can actually stay on the throttle until we get to the next bridge. We're getting a yellow here, so we technically need to prepare to stop at the next signal, but we will see the next signal from far away. And it is yellow too. The 15 will be past the next signal that is yellow at the moment. So we can just coast into the station here and we will be below the 15 when we get there. Since we are still going a bit uphill, we even need to apply some power to pull the train in and not to lose too much speed. And as soon as the platform starts, there will be a reduction to 10. And we can almost use the gradient to slow us down. You can see there is a red light at the end of the platform. If we had a DRA, a driver's reminder appliance, we would be required to activate it, but we don't have one on this train. So we just have to think of it without the help of a DRA. So I actually got a bit slow. Stop marker at this station is in the correct position, and we stop. And we play the guard again. Store is in the way, guard open. All clear. People are already leaving the train like the rats on a sinking boat. There's actually an underpass at this station here. And this lives there in real life as well. I think it's the only underpass on this line. Close the doors. All good. Guard close. And back to the cab. And we can see signal is still red. So there was no need to hurry, we have to wait anyway. Can tell the signal that we are here. Signal says you know that you are here, just wait for the signal to change, man. Can play around with the cab lights a bit. See, we have neon lights here. And here is the reason why our signal is red, because the line will be unidirectional as soon as we are out of the station. Platform, signal, and go. Don't forget we are still in a 10 limit here. Don't just rush off. Again, no sign, but the train needs to be away from the platform fully. Then we can accelerate to 15. What it's about when the tip reaches this railing on the left side. Can accelerate to 15, whistle board. Here starts the 45. We're going uphill here. So in case you overdo it and switch to full parallel too early, then you can stall your train here effectively. Like this, I was just showing it. I switched too early and we are not drawing any power anymore because we are going uphill. So we have to go all the way back to off. And if it still does not work, brakes hold, brakes released, and then it typically goes again or works again. shunting full series and not switch to full parallel until we get to the 20 miles. Then it should be safe. So, next station is already the penultimate station before we get to Shanklin. It's Lake. A station especially for going to the beach. And I actually used the diamond for a marker to coast into the station. So, since I demonstrated stalling the train, we are a bit late. But this is not the worst thing to happen. Again, let's play the guard. Close the door that nobody goes into your cab. Guard open. You can see as soon as you do the guard open thing, the sequence starts, so you're not losing anything. They'll always try to push you out of the way. And this, even though it says abusive and offensive behavior or language directed at island line staff will not be tolerated under no circumstances. Well, obviously, pushing about does not count as offensive behavior. Guard close. Back to the cab. Sit. Platform check. All good. Release. Go. We can go as fast as we can out of this station because we are on full line speed 45. And the next stop is already the last one. Until the year 1966, Shanklin was actually not the terminus for this line, but there were two more stations. But they closed it down and did not reopen them again. Again, still running uphill, so we will lose momentum as soon as we switch off the throttle. And that means we don't need the brakes too early. AJ, did it get any better with the lagging issues, or is it still bad? Here's the coasting diamond. That is actually perhaps a bit late, because we have to be down to 15 before we enter the station. It's good? Well, that's nice to hear. Again, already or only one track. There's no stop marker at this station, at least I have not seen any. So we have to go by the yards that are indicated on the HUD. So last time playing the guard. Open the not for public use doors. Guard open. All clear. By the way, you might have realized that this is open. Open right and open left is always in relation to the A end. So when we're running from the D end, everything is turned around. Did I use the guard buzzer? Well, close the doors. And this is the service. Yeah, Shanklin here. And throw a last glance maybe on our 483. Those trains had been in service on this line until the year 2021, I think, and then they got replaced by the 484 that we will be driving on our way back from here to the Pier Head in Ryde. And before those trains ran on this line, I think the year 1988, they had even older tube stock, the standard stock from 1923 that was reused on the line. So actually 3 generations of decommissioned subway trains were always transported to this line here. What I wanted to do in terms of presentation, we have been using the brakes and did not worry that it said EP brakes, EP hold, EP min, EP normal and EP max. But what is it actually? EP brakes, electro-pneumatic brakes. It sounds quite high tech, but it is a technology that has been around for almost 100 years. And Sire Moon corrected me in the comments on the 1938 stock video that my assumption that the EP brakes were installed in the 38 stock after World War II is not correct, but they actually were around when those trains were built from new. So obviously the London Underground was much earlier in using electro-pneumatic brakes than other railway carriers. So let's have a look at brakes. Obviously that is stuff that we all know more or less, but I want to look at it anyway to develop how electro-pneumatic brakes work. How do brake works? We have here a train, a very short train, like the one that we had just in our service here. 2 cars. You can drive it from both ends, and they both have 2 bogies with 2 axles each. And how do we stop or slow down a train like this? The most traditional way actually is to use brake blocks, and these brake blocks are pressed against the wheels. Other installation use brake discs and calipers so that the wheels are actually not used for slowing it down, but this is the most common and most traditional way to press brake blocks against the wheels to slow down the wheels, and the wheels have this friction and transfer it to the rail, and this slows down the whole component or the whole installation. And how do we press the brake blocks against the wheels? We use brake cylinders, but it's more or less a tube or a cylinder or a pipe, and it has a piston in it, and the piston can travel along this tube, and it has a spring. So if there is no force working on the left side here of the piston against the piston head, then the spring will push the piston to the left, so it will go into the tube. And if you connect this piston end with some rods and gearings, then those rods and gearings, I just drew it here in a more or less standardized fashion, so this is actually a bit more complicated. You need fulcrums and whatever, but the idea is that if you extract the piston, then it will press the brake blocks against the wheels, and if the piston goes back into its starting position by force of the spring, then the brake blocks will be removed from the wheels and you don't apply the brakes, but you release them. This is the idea of those kinds of brakes that have been around for more than 100 years and are still in use on many trains. And obviously you need the same installation on every vehicle. Obviously there can be more than one brake cylinder on a vehicle, but let's just stick with one that operates all the brakes on this vehicle to keep it a bit more simple. But then we obviously need to have some installation that controls this brake cylinder and makes the brake cylinder to retract or to expand so that the brakes are applied or released. And in the traditional air brake, or it's an indirect automatic air brake, what we have on so many trains, we use control valves that are also called triple valves, and those thingies control the brake cylinder. They have been around since, I think, 1869 or something like this, when George Westinghouse invented this kind of air brake. So we have control valves. We won't look at how they are actually working, but we will just treat them as a black box here. And those thingies control the brake cylinders. Since it is an air brake, we obviously need air and compressed air, pressurized air to work this, and for that we need to have a tank where we keep the air that we use in our brake system. This would be the main reservoir, so typically on the locomotive or anywhere else. It does not necessarily need to be on the first vehicle, but somewhere on the train there will be a main reservoir and there will be a compressor, and the compressor will create the pressurized air, so it will just pump air into the main reservoir, and by pumping more air than there is before, it will raise the pressure and create pressurized air. So this is the air that we will use in our air brake system, and we obviously need a pipe to transport it along the train, to connect it with those control valves, to use it in our system. So we need at least one pipe that runs along the whole train, and obviously where there is a coupling, we need some sort of coupling for this pipe. This can be a hose with cocks on the both ends of the vehicles that are connected. We have seen this a lot. This can be integrated in the coupling, so that when coupling the vehicles, then also those pipes get connected, and they by definition need to run alongside the whole train so that you can couple on both ends. Not only on our two vehicles like we have them here, but even if you have 100 or 120 cars and vehicles, you have one line, at least one line that runs through the whole train, and that is connected with the main reservoir and the control valve, so that we have the pressurized air to use it. An non-indirect but a direct brake would work in a way that those valves here would just pump the pressurized air into the brake cylinders and apply the brakes if we want to apply them, and maybe allow them to release if we don't want to brake and release the brakes. But this would be a direct brake. Why are we not using a direct brake? This is quite simple, because just imagine for some reason the train line gets disconnected and we are losing the possibility to provide the control valves with the pressurized air, then it would not be possible to brake anymore. So this is obviously not a fail-safe system. So George Westinghouse at the time came up with the idea that we build a system that releases when pressurized and applies the brakes when if not pressurized. And for that we need pressurized air on every vehicle. And for that we have auxiliary reservoirs on every vehicle of that kind that keeps, or yeah, that keep the pressurized air for use on every brake cylinder. Also, it is faster because the way obviously is shorter that the pressurized air needs to travel to get to the brake cylinder. So we have on each and every vehicle not only a control valve, so a little auxiliary reservoir to keep the pressurized air. So one thing that the control valve obviously needs to be able to do is to fill the auxiliary reservoir the pressurized air from the main reservoir. So this is one thing that it can do, and this is done on every vehicle. So if our brakes are released and our brake system is set up and charged, the auxiliary reservoirs will be filled with pressurized air. If we want to apply the brakes, then the control valves can switch and allow the air from the auxiliary reservoir to go into the brake cylinder. The brake cylinder extracts the piston and presses the brake blocks against the wheels. If we want to release the brakes again, then the control valves switch again and they allow the pressurized air in the brake cylinder to go out into the atmosphere, and then the spring in the brake cylinder will push back the piston and the brakes release. And at the same time, we get reservoir air back into the auxiliary reservoir. So this is why it is a triple valve, because it can do those three things. It can allow reservoir air to go into the auxiliary reservoir, it can allow auxiliary reservoir air to go into the brake cylinder, and it can allow brake cylinder pressure air out into the atmosphere. This is why it is called a triple valve. And this is an invention that has been around since and is in different variations still in use. And Westinghouse was not only a great inventor, obviously, but he also knew how to make money out of his inventions. And the Westinghouse air brake company is still one of the biggest railway technology companies in the United States. It's now called Wabtec, and the WAP in Wabtec is Westinghouse Air Brake Company, and they are called Wabtec now since they merged with Motive Power. I think that is the company that built the Baby Bullet locomotive, AJ, if you remember. So they are still big in business, all based more or less on this invention. They do not only build the brakes, but other things railway related as well. But this was the origin of all that. So that is the idea. What we still do not know is how to control the valve. So how do we tell the control valve whether it should allow reservoir air into the auxiliary reservoir and at the same time drain the brake cylinders, or whether they should allow to fill the brake cylinders with air from the auxiliary reservoir? And for that, traditionally, we use a pipe with pressurized air, and according to the pressure in this pipe, the valves will do the one or the other. They can be, we are looking at a twin pipe system, a second pipe that runs along the train and that is used exclusively to control the valves and tell them what to do. There are obviously also single pipe brake system of that kind, where the reservoir stuff and the control stuff is done in one single pipe. So the typical American freight trains with 100+ cars, they typically use only one pipe of that kind that runs along the whole train, and it is used for both purposes, for controlling the control valves and for allowing the reservoir air to go to the auxiliary reservoirs. So we will have most probably a a presentation about how those control valves can do that with only one pipe. But since we are supposed to look at the EP brakes, we are looking at for 4 reasons at a twin pipe system, where we have 2 pipes. And if you look at German trains, for example, if they still have a brake pipe, they typically also have a second pipe. So on German trains, it would be the Hauptluftleitung for the brake pipe and the Hauptluftbehälterleitung for the reservoir pipe. So typically 2 pipes. Okay, this brake pipe in yellow would be also connected obviously between the vehicles, so we can use them. We have the brake pipe and the main reservoir pipe on a twin pipe indirect automatic air brake system. So, and the pressure in the brake pipe can be controlled with our lever, with our valve in the cap. So we just allow air into or out of the brake pipe. If we release the brake, we allow the brake pipe to be filled with reservoir air up to a certain predefined maximum. And if we apply the brake, then we lower the pressure in the brake pipe. And this tells the control valves to either allow reservoir air into the brake cylinders or to allow air in the brake cylinders to go out of the brake cylinders again. Why is that red and yellow and blue? This is actually, I think, a coding that is used on all pneumatic plans, so that you don't confuse those different pipes and circuits for the pressurized air. So reservoir air is typically painted blue, and the brake pipe control pressure is typically yellow, and the pressure in the brake cylinders is red. So this is why I use different colors here for that. Let's have a look at how it works. If we have full brake pipe pressure, then the brake cylinder pressure is at 0. Then the spring will push the piston all the way back, because with full pressure in the brake pipe, the control valve will allow the air in the brake cylinder to go out into the atmosphere and the auxiliary reservoir to replenish. And that means we do not have brake force, because the brake block will be removed from the wheel. On the other extreme, if the brake pipe is empty, is drained, if there is no pressure in it, then we will have the maximum pressure in the brake cylinder, because then the control valve will be told allow as much auxiliary reservoir air into the brake cylinder as possible, and then we have the maximum of brake force applied. And that shows us that pressure falling in the brake pipe will increase the pressure in the brake cylinder, and this is why it is called an indirect brake, because we have an indirect proportionality between those two pressures here. And the brake force is directly proportional to the pressure in the brake cylinder pressure, in the brake cylinder. Well, at least if you look at it in a simplified way. And in between, if you just lower the brake pipe pressure gradually, then you will gradually increase the pressure in the brake cylinder, and thus gradually increase the brake force. And if you can do this more or less in steps and notches, or really gradually, it depends on the valve that you are using and the system. Also, it depends on the brake valve and the system, if you have to lap it manually, or if there is auto-lapping brakes where you just have to put it to 10%, 15%, or and then the system will keep it at that level. This is all stuff that I don't want to go into today. I just want to keep up with the fact that with decreasing pressure in the brake pipe, we are increasing the pressure in the brake cylinder. Why is that a good thing? why can't we have it the other way around? Why not release the brake with an empty brake pipe and apply them with a maximum or a filled brake pipe to the maximum? That is quite obvious. Just imagine you are running up Cajon Pass with your train with 120 tank cars full of hazmat, and then the coupling breaks and your train is rolling downward towards San Bernardino. Then it would be a great thing if the train would apply the brakes on its own, and this happens if the train line gets severed and the brake pipe pressure drops because there is a leakage then obviously in the brake pipe, and then it will apply the brakes automatically, and this is why we have an automatic air brake system here, and it is also easier to perform an emergency brake application by draining the brake pipe than by inflating it. This is the fail-safe idea about this brake system. Okay, how do we do the step to the electro-pneumatic brakes then? Well, so far the automatic indirect air brake is a great system. It is such a great system that it is still in use on many trains and railways. The downside is that air travels rather slowly along this brake pipe, and this is not so important if you only have two vehicles like in my drawing here, but it is more important if you have a lot of cars. And just imagine you have a mile-long train with 100+ cars, then it takes some time for the pressure change in the brake pipe to travel all the way from the top to the end of the train. You see that on Sherman Hill, on Cajon Pass, if you have the two pressure indicators for front end and rear end, and the rear end always will lag behind, and this is because it just takes time for the pressure to propagate along the brake pipe, and then obviously if you are blowing up the brake pipe from the front, then you will lose some power of blowing it up at the end, so the pressure will not always be the same. It will lag behind on the end, and this leads to the fact that the brakes at the rear end of the train will apply significantly slower than the brakes at the front end if you just allow it for that to happen, because the pressure change propagates along the train, hits this valve, it applies its brakes, then it hits this valve and this valve for the next 100 cars that come behind. So it is a bit slow. Wouldn't it be nice if we can tell all our control valves at the same time that they should apply brakes and inflate their brake cylinders? And telling them at the same time works really nicely with electricity, because electricity does not need to propagate. It more or less works instantly. And why not drop this idea with telling those control valves with a air pressure signal and tell them with an electronic signal? Well, the control valves obviously don't understand electric signals, so we need to put something on them, and that is called a brake distributor. And this brake distributor is more or less a thing that has magnetic valves in its simplest form, and we can energize those valves, and then they leave or let air in or out through these valves, and we put them on the control valves. Every control valve gets a brake distributor, and those brake distributors get connected with an electric wire with the brake valve and then along the train. So we have an electric train line here for the brake now, and obviously we need to couple them as well. And then we can move our brake valve and send electric signals to the brake distributors, and the brake distributors can do the same thing as the valves. They can allow main reservoir air to go into the auxiliary reservoir and drain the brake cylinders, or they can allow auxiliary reservoir air to go into the brake cylinders and apply the brakes. So let's call this electric wire a brake line. and in the first implementations of those systems, they were constructed in a way that if we had no energy on the brake line, then we would release the brakes. And if we wanted to apply the brakes, then we had to energize this wire, and then we could apply the brakes. We see at once that the problem is, if our train gets separated, if for any reason we lose the power in the system, then we cannot apply brakes anymore. So this is not fail-safe, and obviously the people that constructed those systems saw that too, and so they left the brake pipe on the trains as a backup system for emergency brake applications. So in case that the brake valve handle was moved into emergency, then we would skip all this stuff with the electric signal, and we would drain the brake pipe, and even with a de-energized brake line we would have the emergency application. So we kept the brake pipe more or less all the time pressurized until we go to emergency, and then we drain it, and then we skip the electric part and go back to the pneumatic emergency brake application. Now, those are the older systems, and well, can we not build a fail-safe system with the electric system? We can. Obviously, in those older systems we only had a full brake pipe or an empty one, and we did not really need it in between. On the newer systems, we would not have just one wire, but we would have a wire with different threads, and or different wires actually. And then by de-energizing and energizing different wires of this bundle, we can send different signals to the brake distributor. So if we energize all of them, so this is a system that is described in one source that I read as being a general system that is used in British, or was used on British trains quite a lot. If we have 3 wires and we energize all of them, we can release the brakes completely. If we de-energize the first wire of them, this can be defined as notch 1 braking. If we de-energize only the second wire, we can call this notch 2. And if we de-energize wire 1 and 2, we can define this as level 3 braking. And in case none of the wires is energized, so de-energize all the wires, then we would have an emergency brake to perform by our brake distributors. And this is exactly what we want. In case that our vehicles get separated or the system loses power, it goes automatically again into emergency full brakes on. And this is as fail-safe as the pneumatic control with the drained brake pipe more or less was, right? And so we can also allow the safety systems to cut the connection in the brake line, for example, so that we can have penalty brakes that are performed by the safety systems in this system. And this allows us to either depressurize the brake pipe at all, like I think it was the Baureihe 423 that we used on the Köln-Aachen stream, that actually runs with 0 brake pipe pressure all the time, because it is using EP brakes and does not need pressure in the air pipe anymore, in the brake pipe anymore, and the brake pipe is more or less only used as a backup system in case that the EP brake system should fail or whatever. Or we can just get rid of our brake pipe totally and only rely on the EP control of the brake distributors. Then we don't need the control valves anymore, we just have the brake distributor do the job of the control valves. And this is more or less the idea of the electro-pneumatic EP brakes if you have it along the whole train. Yeah. Thank you for bearing with me with this stuff. And I thought that the 38 tube stock Respectively, the British Rail Class 483 is a nice train to look at this stuff because it still has both systems on its brake system. If we look at this, do you want to give up control? No, I don't want to give up control. If you look at the brake handle here, it can be released, and then we have the EP, what is electro-pneumatic hold, min, normal, max. What is 4 notches here at this time. We can send 4 different signals along the train line to apply more and more pressure, and we can actually see it. This is for the brake cylinder here, this is for the brake pipe. The brake pipe will stay at its maximum even if we apply the brakes. So go back to that, but we can see that the pressure in the brake cylinders will increase. And for what reason that I cannot really explain is that EP hold will increase the pressure to 15 pounds per square inch, and EP min will already get it to 55, and EP normal and EP max will not increase the pressure in the brake pipe anymore. If anyone has an explanation for that, I will be very welcome to read it in the comments. But at the same time, the brake pipe pressure does not change if we use the electric brakes, because the electro-pneumatic brakes, because it is always fully pressurized. If we go beyond the EP max and go to Westinghouse hold, you can see that the brake cylinder loses its pressure, because now we are in the point where we don't do anything with the Westinghouse brake. The Westinghouse brake being the air brake. We are now using the brake pipe. And if we go from Westinghouse hold to Westinghouse charge, then we are lowering the pressure in the brake pipe. You can actually see that in the gauge here, quite slowly, but still. And when hold, then we just freeze it at the position where it is. If we go to release, then you can see that the air brake is, the brake pipe is inflated again. Westinghouse hold would just keep the pressure that there is, but turn off the EP brakes. Westinghouse charge, since it is a manually lapping brake, will lower the pressure in the brake pipe as long as we keep the handle in charge, and when we go back to hold, it will freeze it there. Whereas Westinghouse emergency, this is where we drain our air brake pipe to 0, and then the brakes go full on. Oh shit! I didn't remove the presentation. AJ, I'm sorry. Thank you for that. I was just demonstrating it here with my brake handle and had the presentation on all the time. Again, we have the release on the train brake, we have the EP hold, we have the EP min, we have the EP normal and the EP max. And then comes Westinghouse hold, Westinghouse charge and emergency. And we have the gauges. This is the brake cylinder gauge, the pressure in the brake cylinder. We have on the right side here the pressure in the brake pipe, and we have on the left side the main reservoir. Interesting are those two, the brake cylinder and the brake pipe. As long as we are using the EP brake, we can see the pressure in the brake cylinders react. As I said, with EP hold it is at 15, with EP min it is already at 55. EP normal and EP max does not increase the pressure anymore. If anyone has an explanation for that, please let me know in the comments. As soon as, but at the same time, the pressure in the brake pipe stays at its value. It does not change as long as we are using only the EP brakes, as I have just told you in the presentation. As soon as we go to Westinghouse hold, we are losing the pressure in the brake cylinders, because now we are not using the EP brakes anymore, and we need to move the handle into Westinghouse charge to lower the pressure in the brake pipe and increase the pressure in the brake cylinders. It goes quite slowly here, but you can see that it is actually moving. If we go back to release, then the brake pipe gets inflated again. and the pressure in the brake cylinders vanishes. If I go to emergency, then I drain my brake pipe completely and the brakes go full on. Actually, they are not full on because 54 was more with the EP brakes, but that is the idea of this system. So EP brake over twin pipe Westinghouse indirect automatic air brake. And now let's switch to a modern version of EP brakes on the more modern train. For that we switch to the newer version of the Isle of Wight 22. And I have a service for that prepared as well. I think it is the late service at 8:30. No. Need to go to the other DLC. Yeah, I think that is good. Okay. To the trains, choose a route. Isle of Wight 22 timetable, and I think the 20 something Shanklin. Yeah, those trains came into existence as D78 tube stock. And then were modified by Viva Rail in 2015, for example, to run on a line like this. If we're going from Shanklin to Ryde Pier Head, you will have the wrong setting for the lights. So if this is important for you, you need to switch that around so that the tail lights are at the tail end, and at the front we have daylight markers. Or actually we can run it at night because we're already almost at night. We have safety system here, AWS, DST, DRA, TPFS, and then the system always wants us to put the TPWS isolation into normal. Master key, reverser, and then I said I want to have night running lights. Okay, good. Platform. And we can start. You hear the brake cylinders hissing the air out. One striking difference between the two trains is that we only have one combined handle here. Not one handle for the brakes and one handle for the power, but one combined one that can go into power or into brakes. Maybe our passengers should have some lights. And even though this train is so much more modern than the other one, it is nevertheless using EP brakes just the same way. But it does not longer have the twin pipe air brake, the Westinghouse brake underneath. But it is relying solely on the electric control of the brake cylinders. CD Raider says, wow, what a great modernization of these trains. Yeah, it's not actually the newest and latest shit that they got for their island line. But those trains were actually, well, about 40 years old. But obviously, well, they got new traction motors. I think they have Austrian traction motors. They have 750 volts DC here. And for what reason ever, the new version of the Isle of Wight does not longer count in yards, but in feet in the game. Good man, don't push me about. We no longer need to walk back to the guards panel. We can control the doors from our cab here. Oh, it was you. I have to say thank you for reminding me of the presentation, CD Raider. Close. Close. Sit down. Platform check. And go. Because of the taillights we have already lost some time. Let's see if we can make it up. What I did not find was a reliable source telling me whether and what kind of a dynamic brake those trains have. Now we're going to Sandown. And here the Morpeth board that announces the 15 is in almost no distance to the limit to 15 that comes almost immediately after the next signal. In a situation where we are going downhill, so it is required to apply brake notch 2 at the Morpeth board, more or less, to slow down properly for the 15. Sandown, you remember, was the station with the underpass that was using 2 platforms even in the old version of the route. This is the station where we have been capped at the red light. CD Raider says he missed the D-stock in operation by half a year when I first visited London. Alright. I have unfortunately no idea on what trains I rode when I was at London last. I wasn't really interested in train stuff then, so I can't say. So don't forget that we're starting with a 15 limit. Well, I guess that those trains here must have some kind of a dynamic brake, because they have a... Great. Now my second screen turned off. Let's see if I can get it to work again. Here, a dynamic brake cut-out switch. So, if I can cut it out... So, if I can cut it out, there must be a dynamic brake, right? Ah... Now everything is on the wrong screen. No! I just have to allow the train to run unattended when I'm putting my stuff up again. So much for that. I'm not getting it done. No chance. Okay, now I'm back in the game at least. Here's the moped for the 15. Here we have significantly more time to slow down for braiding, because the 15 will not be before we get to the second signal. And behind that, here is the 15, so we can just let it coast, and I can try again to bring up. Especially I cannot find my chat anymore. Well, that is bad. And I'm afraid AJ has fallen asleep already, otherwise she could have tried to fix it. Well, you can see braiding has now 2 lines, and the southern, or what is it, eastern platform is working now. And we have a slightly different speed profile for the stop here at the station. So, wait a second. Can I not get my stuff back? No, I can't. Whatever, then I will have to do without. And here's the chat. Yes, I've got it back. Oh, good. Then we can safely go on. starting in a 15 reduction. That holds true for a bit behind the station. And then there will be the part where the line speed is reduced to 40, not 45, so this is important to remember. At this point we can accelerate, but not beyond the 40. Driving uphill at this point. And soon we will be able to accelerate to 45. Here is the sign for the increase to 45. Still running uphill. CD Radar says Deutsche Bahn Baureihe 484 is new Berlin S-Bahn. Oh. Reading the chat leads to speeding. Shouldn't do that. I've never been on a new train on the Berlin S-Bahn. Last time I was on the S-Bahn in Berlin, it was those super old, I forgot the number, but those really flimsy things that look like caravans, more or less. Here the Morpeth board for the reduction to 30 at Smallbrook Junction. You remember that is the station with a connection to the Heritage Steam Railway. We're not stopping this time, but we have to slow down to 30. 30 is at the end of the platform. But as soon as we are through, we can go back to the 45. So, I want to direct your attention to the next signal. It is a distance signal, Semaphore 1, and from all I can see, this looks totally green. But the blade, the yellow blade, is obviously in the on position. And when we're getting closer, all of a sudden it looks yellow. So that is weird. On the old line, the same signal in this position actually looks yellow and not green. I think this is something that Rivet should look into, because that is very strange behavior for a signal. Stop at Ryde St. John's Road. That's the station with the depot. If you want to use those cap door open and close buttons, consider doing it when sitting down, because otherwise you're... Oh, I should maybe unlock the doors before I wait for the passengers to get off the train. Because otherwise your seat will always be in the way and you cannot operate those buttons. So sit down and close, then it's much easier. Now back to the tunnel. The seat looks comfy. I don't know, I do not have that much experience with driver seats on trains. It definitely looks more comfy than this one here. Yeah, I almost forgot you can... I think you can open the passenger windows here. Speeding. Speeding into the tunnel. This tunnel actually, from what I read, was one of the major limiting factors regarding what kind of trains can run on this line. Because obviously they needed to fit through this tunnel here. And another thing that Rivet should look into is that they never illuminate the hand on their speedos. Had the same problem with the Stadler train, the Flirt on Luzern-Sursee. They illuminate the gauge, but they don't illuminate the hand. And then it is always hard to read your speedo. Esplanade. What I wanted to congratulate Rivet on, though, is that the sea and the water looks actually much better now than it used to do under Train Sim World 2 and the old one. Well, you always have some funny effects on the edges, especially at night, but now the water itself looks much better, and it has some tiding effects here. You can see the hovercrafts for the line that connect you to the station here. I think those things are collectibles, if I'm not mistaken. The hovercrafts are actually here in this part of the track. I enjoy it every time I run here. Okay, let's drive out to the pier and finish this. It is a unique piece of track, yeah. This piece of track is actually why I bought the original Isle of Wight line. And then I was so disappointed that it looks really shitty with the water. But now I am happy with it. What sign? I did not really see a sign. Maybe we should go back with the external camera. With yellow arrow before the bridge. Oh, I don't know. We have to check. Let me get this train to a stop and then we check. There are TPWS transponders in the track, but no AWS transponders. That's quite unique as well, as far as it comes to routes in the game here. So, that's the pier. And now let's see what sign CD radar spotted here. Must have been... This is where we started, right? Ah, that one. That is a fixed caution signal. That is like an distance signal in caution position that is always on. So you have to treat it like a signal showing a yellow. Some of them actually have the AWS magnets connected with them that are always on. And yeah, there is one in the Brighton main line as well when you go drive out from this. Is it Arlington or something like this? Where you have some of those Class 66 services where there's a bit of shunting, and when you go out to the Brighton main line you have one of those constantly on caution signal. Yeah, nice. Oh, I have to lock my doors, otherwise the service won't finish. Yeah. But now I love the sea here. Now I love this place. Turn to free roam, please. Yeah, that's that. Anything else that I wanted to do? Ah, yeah, I wanted to show the train from the interior, because that is nicely done as well, in my opinion. You have a lot of information about the island line here. You have a diagram for the line, and explained Smallbrook Junction. Here you can see the connection to the Heritage Steam Railway to Wootton. Here you can see the ferries connecting the Pier Head to Portsmouth and the Esplanade to Southsea with the hovercraft. Then you have a picture of all the stations on the line with a bit of an explanation. There's an advertisement for the steam railway. And there is some advertisement for the line in itself. Then you have here a network plan where you can see there should be game screens. Yeah, that is genius. And here you can see how the Isle of Wight, what is that here? So what we have driven is this Pier Head to Shanklin. And here you connect to Portsmouth. And then you can go to Woking, and from Woking to London Waterloo. What is the Western Main Line, I think. Not the West Coast Main Line, what we had in the Bakerloo video last week. So you can actually see where you are. Here's Bournemouth. No, we're not driving the service. Don't bother. Rivet forums. Advertisement for Luzern Sursee. You remember where we did all the ETCS videos about. Yeah, and then it repeats itself, I guess. Oh. The AI is already taking over the train. If you want to go from one car to the other, you actually have to push this button and wait a bit. You see it flashing until you can operate not only the window, but the door to go to the next compartment or the next car. You have a PIS system inside the cars. And I think you can also open the windows here for more ventilation. So what you really have to praise Rivet for is that they have some unique features that you don't really find on a lot of other trains. Yeah. And here they actually switched the lights correctly, even though this train is now in ATO mode because there is no driver on it anymore. Well, thank you very much for staying with me, even though the second part of the stream was a bit chaotic because my second screen turned off and then I had to restart all the screens that are typically running there. Thank you CD Radar for all your input, it was nice. And thank you AJ if you're still awake for moderating my stream. And hopefully see you next week. Take care and have a nice week.